Welcome to the Morning Podcast. My name is Bill Beer at Pickem 13 on Twitter. And joining me tonight, as always, Dallas Bergen at CFL Fans Toronto. And we are on the All Sports All Plays Network. How are we doing, Dallas?
Hey, doing great, Bill. Good to see you. How are things on your end?
Good. Got some good games to talk about. Exciting games. I guess it was Labor Day weekend. So I know we went into last week telling the viewers about Labor Day weekend in the CFL. It's something special and that it's a great time to be a fan. Can you tell us a little bit about Labor Day?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as we mentioned last week, this is like the biggest CFL game week of the season. I think for some, it's even as big as, first round of the playoffs, where we have these three traditional rivalries that go way back with teams that are in relatively close geography to one another, allowing fans to travel on the long weekend and take in these games. And so you have Saskatchewan and Winnipeg on the Sunday all the time. And those fans from Winnipeg come into Regina and sell it every year. Lots of intensity there. And then on the Labor Day Monday, first game is always the East game with the Toronto Argonauts and Hamilton Ticats, just 40 miles apart. So a great rivalry of the QEW, the highway connecting the two cities. And then following that, what we call the Battle of Alberta between the Edmonton Elks and Calgary Stampeders. And so this is just such a great time to be a football fan. I mean, every football fan, no matter the league, loves when September hits. You get that little more cool in the air and the crunch of the leaves. And it's on. It's football season. In the Canadian Football League, this is the drive to the playoffs. This year, a little bit different. Usually our seasons are half over by this point. But now here we are at week 5, week 6 coming up.
Yeah.
But still, there's a lot on the line and a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, and I hope everybody got a chance to check out the games this weekend. As we said before, they're all on ESPN Plus here in the United States. And up there in Canada, it's on the TSN. We didn't have a lot of dramatic finishes like we did a week ago, but they're the CFL this year, they've been playing the under. The under has been hitting instead of the over on these games. Is that due to not having a preseason, you think?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. No preseason games this year because of COVID-19 and a shortened training camp and a training camp that came late. So, and in football, defenses, offenses always take more time to really come together and gel. And so sometimes the first few weeks can be a little bit more clumsy. So yeah, we've had really exciting games, lots of late finishes, but some pretty low scoring contests until this weekend. And so we had some offenses. Almost all of the offenses explode. One or maybe two really sputtered, but a lot of points on the board this week. And so even though we didn't get those close finishes at the end, we got to see a lot of big plays, and that was pretty exciting for the matchups this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and let's get into week 5 games. And our first game that we're going to talk about is Friday night, this past Friday night. It was Montreal at Ottawa. And what a game. What a game. Montreal coming into this game, I believe they lost 2 in a row. And their quarterback, Vernon Adams Jr., really didn't look the greatest the last few weeks. He was really off. In this game, they just came out. He looked awesome. He looked incredible. Like all the things that I heard about him in the preseason or what he could be, he was just on it Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. That team, they came together, and the stakes were really high for this one. This is not one of the Labor Day classics, so this game often comes before the weekend, and at different times we've had Montreal in the league, Ottawa in the league, or one of them out of the league, and then BC, who is on the bye this week, who we'll see in action with Ottawa this coming week. But in some ways, this was one of the most interesting games to look forward to because both of these teams were kind of in trouble. And, coach is going to be on the hot seat, whoever lost this week. Montreal had been playing undisciplined football. Vernon Adams just hadn't hit his stride, that magic that he was creating in 2019. And, his receivers had been letting him down at times, a number of drops in the previous week. And so it was exciting to really see them start to click. Unfortunate to see Ottawa still kind of sputter, but saw some changes there. So yeah, what did you think about the quick quarterback move with Ottawa in that game?
I tell you what, I wasn't surprised because I've watched all the games this year, and the first few games, their offense just haven't done much at all. I mean, in fact, this was the first game where they had a passing touchdown. You got to think about that. Week 5, and I guess they had a bye at one point. So 4 games. It takes them 4 games to get a passing touchdown. That's just unbelievable.
That's awful. And we're trying to get people to watch the CFL here, but that Ottawa team has been uncharacteristically
and they have a
lousy.
new coach. They have a new system in place, new quarterback. It was interesting, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing I wanted to bring up is we had a post-game interview with Vernon Adams Jr., and he got very emotional. What did you make of that interview?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really enjoyed that. I mentioned last week, I really love players that are human with us. Athlete interviews are often boring because these guys quite often aren't willing to show any of themselves, the kind of give 110% kind of thing. And Vernon Adams is a real authentic and passionate, vulnerable and emotional guy. And you could tell he had been having a really tough time, tough enough that he opened up about talking to former teammates and coaches, getting lots of tweets and messages of support, trying to help him find that game that he had in 2019. And he was putting a lot of that on himself, teared up in that interview. And I don't know, it was just nice to see him so happy and so relieved that his team had success on the field and that, his leadership had been a part of that. I think he's a polarizing personality in the league. And I think because guys who are like that, who are a little hot-headed, little, raw with their emotions, people can make judgments on. I think sometimes people think that Vernon Adams has a big ego, and I don't know. I think he's real. He's like really real. And I have so much respect for a player like that to open up about that stuff.
He's so talented. The other thing, he's so talented. And you saw the struggles, it's like there was a switch flipped for this game. I don't know what it was, but it was very entertaining. It was fun to watch them play. And as we said, Ottawa has struggled. Matt Nichols has been the quarterback. He struggled. He threw only like 5 passes in this game, and then he gets pulled for Dominic Davis, who had played in 2019 a little bit, and their offense just woke up the first time this season. And that's when the game really got entertaining because it was going back and forth, and there was a little bit more scoring. Ottawa started to catch up, but then, Montreal kind of pulled away. But it's interesting. What do you think? Who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback this week? I mean, it almost has to be Dominic Davis, right?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't check a practice report today, but you have to think that the Matt Nichols time is done with as poorly as this season started, and how much heat the coach and GM are under as well. And you remember they went out and got the quarterback that they wanted in Matt Nichols because Nichols and Paul LaPolice, head coach, had been together in Winnipeg, and they let Arbuckle go to Toronto. So seeing the success of Arbuckle hasn't helped the cause of those two gentlemen in Ottawa. So they've been on the hot seat a little bit with that as
Right.
well. And with Nichols unable to move the football at all, you think that they have to go back to Davis, even though he's had his shot to be a starter and at times has shown some flashes, but
Yep.
it's pretty clear he's never going to be top tier, among the top tier quarterbacks in the league. So I think they have big questions there in Ottawa to figure out at that position. And this is just a team really lacking identity. I get that they've had some injuries as well, but who's their running back? Flanders has been hurt.
Right.
And, Davis came in and Justin Davis was okay, but this team is lacking identity at really key positions. Guys that are supposed to step into new leadership roles aren't doing it. Nate Bahar had a pretty good game last game, and people are starting to think he's going to be the new Sinopoli. He's going to be the new guy on second down. How many times did he drop the ball? Just had had a really rough night. And I don't know. We've got a great middle linebacker, but this team is definitely a different tier than the rest of the league, which there seems to be great parity among the other 8 teams, or maybe 2 up top and then 6 to follow. But Ottawa is behind the bunch, I think, and it's ugly.
Definitely. So, yeah, it was a very entertaining game. As long as you were rooting or you enjoy Montreal. If you're an Ottawa fan, I don't know what to say. Hopefully things will get better. So,
well, they were cheering at the quarterback change. I think that was the good thing on the night for them. But it's true. Who doesn't love 50+ points being put up, though? So for the rest of us as fans, that was pretty exciting.
Right. Absolutely. So we're gonna go ahead and move to Sunday's game when Winnipeg went into Regina, that you're a little familiar with, and stunned the crowd in Regina with the final score of Winnipeg 23, Saskatchewan 8. Don't tell me that you were happy with that result.
No, it was a pretty bad weekend. I'm a Saskatchewan Roughriders fan, born and raised, and living now in Toronto and a season ticket holder of the Toronto Argonauts. I'm a big fan of them too. So this was not a great weekend. I tweeted jokingly it was a great weekend for tennis because my 2 teams were terrible. And I was pretty confident that the Riders were going to be able to have a great game this week, 3-0, and Cody Fajardo had looked so sharp. Everything was clicking pretty well. Maybe some questions on the offensive line, but for the most part, team was looking really sharp. And I'll tell you, Winnipeg is the championship team that they are. I think a lot of times we've been hesitant to acknowledge that because they're not flashy all the time. They just came in and dominated that Riders team, exposed some deficiencies, and showed that they're the team to beat in the CFL.
They just seem like they're more well-rounded than anybody else between defense, passing offense, running game. They're pretty well-rounded compared to everybody else, what I could get from it. But the one thing that I really noticed in this game is Cody Fajardo, he just was off. He was totally off on this game. I hadn't seen him play this bad all season, and he was he was playing so well that he was headed to that MOP, He was headed in that direction. His stats were that good, and his completion percentage was that good. And any thoughts about what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I will call it a blip. I think Cody in 2019 too showed what he has. I think the league knows that Cody Fajardo is the real deal. And I think he had a rough day. He had some really lousy snaps early on, that shotgun snaps that totally threw the timing of those plays off. And as a result, the balls that he threw were off. He threw a couple, sailed a couple high. He's playing against the 2 best defensive ends in the league, in Jefferson and Jeffcoat. I think he was excited. I wouldn't call it nerves, but Cody can get really amped up by the crowd and the experience in Mosaic Stadium. And I think when they weren't able to get a sustained drive going in the beginning, combined with those snaps and penalties, some drop passes, like just a whole bunch of things went wrong in the beginning. And I think the pressure mounted and mounted, and he was just never able to hit his stride. That's not to put all the game on Cody Fajardo either, but he is the heart and soul of that team in Saskatchewan. But full credit to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I mean, that is a really solid roster. If I were to question one aspect of the game, it was, maybe the kicking game, maybe the receivers.
Oh yeah, I think their kicker missed a couple field goals that were definitely makeable.
Yeah, but when your offense and defense are that good, I mean that front seven is unbelievable, and then that secondary as well. I mean, Dietrich Nichols is someone shouted, mother loving rookie of the year, I think, about
you
Nichols.
Keep saying it, and we haven't said it, but you could say his name almost every week about plays that he's made. So and Adam Bighill. I mean, he didn't have a ton of stats this week, but he's a heck of a player. That's a name that gets called a lot when you watch these Blue Bombers. So,
and the thing, that roster is so deep, that they're so good at all the positions, and they're really well coached team too. So I don't know, they took it to the Riders, and I think it's going to be tough for Saskatchewan to go in and get a win in Winnipeg, as tough as it always is. But this loss by Saskatchewan was a shocker. They had won 15 of the last 16.
Definitely.
I mean, I told everybody, Riders a win. You want to put money on a game, you can always count on the Riders winning at home on Labor Day, and it was ugly.
That it was. So the next group of games were on Labor Day, and these were considered, the Sunday night game and these games. These are the matchups that you see every Labor Day. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's always Winnipeg, Saskatchewan Sunday, and then the other two Monday.
So when we get to the first game on Monday, I was excited about this game because Toronto fan. So I was all hyped up. They hadn't played for a couple weeks because, the Edmonton Elks had some issues and they had to postpone that game. But they go in there and Hamilton puts it to them. Final score 32-19. We saw Toronto dominate Winnipeg a few weeks ago. And then Winnipeg beats up on the 3-0 Saskatchewan team. Toronto goes to Hamilton and they lose bad. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Hamilton looked pretty good, like they're ready for a championship run.
Yeah, lots to talk about there. I mean, I think really there's parity in the CFL, and that's really exciting. It is. It's wild seeing Toronto have that win over Winnipeg. People were so thinking they could go in and beat this Hamilton team that hadn't been looking very good. As I said before, it seems like other than Ottawa, anybody can win any game in this league right now, which is pretty exciting. But I think Hamilton showed who they really are. I mean, I've been shocked all along that they had this rough start, looking at their roster, their coaching staff, the continuity that they've had from 2019. This Hamilton team, I believe, is the real deal. I think that Winnipeg and Hamilton are the two teams that people said they were in February, March, and April, right into July, that they're the teams to beat in this league, and they both proved that this week. I mean, that defense in Hamilton, Toronto, who has run the ball as well as any team in the league, I think, especially their last effort against Winnipeg. You've got Dylan Wynn plugging up the middle, Jagarrett Davis on the end, Ted Laurent also in the middle. So that's like one of the hardest teams to run up the middle on. And then you've got Simone Lawrence and Santos Knox in the linebacking core that can chase guys to the outside. So the running game against Hamilton, really tough. Then you go back it up and you look at the next level. And I believe they have the best secondary in the CFL. And it's like without question. Their head coach was one of the best defensive backs ever in the league. I think that might be wearing off on those guys back there. But, Eric Rogers didn't have a catch until like 5 minutes to go in the game, or I guess the touchdown a couple minutes before that. But he hadn't caught a ball. I think that's Deontay Evans probably for the most part. Jamal Roll was outstanding, shut down DeVaris Daniels. Like those guys in that backfield can, they can totally play.
Absolutely. And some of this has to do with the Labor Day atmosphere too. You think the team was all pumped up. Toronto came in, they didn't look like anybody at the beginning was ready to play. They didn't look like they were ready to play compared to Hamilton. The one thing that I have to say is, Nick Arbuckle came into this game and he's played pretty well so far this season. And he didn't play terrible. He didn't have a lot of time, but he wasn't making the quick decisions he was making the previous week or the previous, 1 week and then part of a game. And that seemed to be a problem because, you don't make a quick decision on this team, they're going to sack the quarterback. And he did have an interception, but I don't think that was 100% of his fault because, Eric Rogers fell down.
Slipped, yeah.
Yeah. The one call that I questioned Toronto in the first half, they had a 3rd and short, and they decided to go for a field goal there right before the first half. I thought that would have been a perfect opportunity to go for it right there because, you had an opportunity to go up for the second half and you hadn't played the greatest, and that would have provided a little bit of momentum. What did you think about that call?
Yeah, that's a good observation. That's tough whether you play those conservatively or aggressively, but when you're on the road like that and you can have an opportunity to take that crowd out of the game at least a little bit to, get a quick score on the board, like Winnipeg was able to do, that makes a huge difference. Yeah, and you're right. All of this may just boil down to it's Labor Day in Hamilton. Hamilton always wins. It's how it goes. The players get so amped up and then they're playing in front of a wild and sold out crowd. And so, but I think, hindsight's 2020, but definitely I would have liked to seen a little more of a gamble there too. They went into the half, I think it was 10-4. They were in the game at the half, the Argos were. So maybe it wasn't the worst decision, but at the same time, to put a touchdown on the board at that point, you're right. That could have really been a difference maker. So, that's a good question, I think.
And then the play that really decided the game, I think it was decided at that point because, Hamilton went up, the punt return, Frankie Williams, they kicked it right down the middle. He came up, made a guy miss and touchdown. All I remember seeing is, Boris Beatty trying to run to the corner, and he's not a guy that's going to catch anybody. But that really broke the game wide open there, and then it just went downhill from there. But
yeah, you're totally right, and that's winning with 3 phases, and I think that's one of Toronto's problems right now. Boris Beatty with the strong leg makes up for some of it on the kickoffs and the punts, but they have no return game. And Daniel Braverman has been serviceable as a receiver, but he's just been disastrous as punt returner, particularly. Kickoffs have been better, but as a punt returner, he's averaging 3.9 yards a return. And in the game the other day, he was 4 yards on 5 punt returns, less than a yard of return. And you look at him, he's not your prototypical punt returner in this league. You look across the field at Frankie Williams and what he's able to do, and if Brandon Banks needs to step under that ball too, they're 40 times and their quickness. Those are the guys that can bring the ball back. And you're right, that was a difference in this game. That third quarter and that punt return by Frankie Williams in particular broke the back of the Toronto Argonauts. And they haven't made a change at punt return. They're losing 100 yards of field position a game with a 3.9 yard return average. So that's one of my big critiques of the Argos right now. They've got to find someone to get on the roster. This was a team that let Mario Alford go. So,
Yeah,
they had
you
someone
see
there
what
that,
he can do already
yeah,
this
yeah. And they do
year.
have injuries. Ricky Collins Jr. is hurt, but like at least try Curly Gittens Jr., who had one of his best days as a receiver. I think
Yeah,
Curly Gittens was like one of the brightest spots for the Argos in this game. And, maybe you don't want to burden him with punt returns when he's becoming an increasingly important part of the offense. But why not with that return game stuttering as it has? You gotta try something there. That's really hurting this team.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And Nick Arbuckle was taken out of this game. And if you think that, oh, he was benched, that sort of thing, it's not. It's Nick Arbuckle's team. I think he was taken out because it was time left in the fourth quarter. They didn't want to get him injured. But I heard a couple people saying, "Oh, who's it going to be to start this week?" It's going to be Arbuckle. It's not. It's not really a question in my mind. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think Arbuckle gets the start. The question to pull him is, yeah, it was an interesting one. I think fans are a little bit divided on that. I mean, the offense wasn't producing. And McLeod came in, and I mean, Hamilton's playing a pretty soft defense at that time, giving a lot of the underneath, which is kind of the game McLeod often excels at too. But I mean, was able to throw 2 touchdown strikes, or no, sorry, one was
One.
at the end, maybe
Yep.
the last drive that Arbuckle
Yep.
had. But anyway, to bring the game close enough that even with a minute left, that game wasn't actually over. As badly
Right.
as Hamilton beat Toronto,
No.
there was a chance, and it wasn't like a pie in the sky chance. It was like, this is the CFL. If they can
And
get one touchdown here, it's a one score game. So it was interesting to see what happened at the end. But
and if not for
I
that
think at the time,
tip pass that went back for a touchdown, Simone Lawrence. If not for
yeah,
that,
another backbreaker, right?
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So the last game of the weekend was in the evening on Monday, and you had the Edmonton Elks go to the Calgary Stampeders, and this was a game that Calgary had dominated this game for a long time. Bo Levi Mitchell and of course he was out this week. They took him off the 6-game injured list. And you thought for a minute maybe there was a possibility he was going to start that game. They put him back on the list for one game. And we had Jake Meyer start this game, who's played pretty decent. And this was a pretty interesting game, I do have to say. I really enjoyed this one. Edmonton won this one 32-20, but it was pretty close. And I mean, Calgary even had the lead late in the third and into the fourth quarter, so you didn't really know where it was going. But the biggest thing I have to take out of this game is Trevor Harris. He's looked pretty awful so far this year, and he was on it. He was on it. Long passes in stride. It some incredible quarterback play. Like him or hate him, he put on a show, and does he have a new star receiver in Mike Jones?
Yeah, Mike Jones over 100 yards.
Yeah.
Pretty outstanding performance indeed. Yeah, that was a good one. Lots of surprises there too. Boy, was I wrong. I didn't give Edmonton much of a chance, partly just because of history, that they don't very often. As you said, the home team wins on Labor Day. What happened this week? It is shocking. But for Edmonton to come off of all of this whole not fiasco, but the COVID
Yeah.
protocol and Jacob Ruby, and I thought that this was a team that didn't have it together. I saw a head coach that ripped a coordinator and fired him the next day. Saw some things on social media that kind of indicated, this room is maybe coming undone with the question of 85% vaccinations and the breaking of protocol. And I didn't give him a chance. And they did. Trevor Harris came out and showed that he's the Trevor Harris that he's one of the most accurate passers in the league. And when he is on, He's as good as anyone, and he was 4 touchdowns tosses, I think, and
4 touchdowns, almost
and
400
sharp,
yards passing,
confident, all of that. They looked good, give them their due, and Jake Maier had a tall order to show it in Calgary in front of that crowd. I thought that he would perform better, so I was a little bit surprised there. But what a great contest, though. It's unreal what's happening right now. I have no idea how to make the picks next week, because usually on Labor Day you just pick the home teams on Labor Day, and then you pick they're going to get their butts kicked going in the home and home on the road the next week, and now I'm so confused. But yeah, interesting to see Andrew Harris and Claris as well in Winnipeg just show their old selves, like 2 really sharp, awesome quarterbacks.
And the week before, Calgary played Winnipeg pretty tight. I mean, Calgary even had a chance to win that game there at the end, and that's why this is so surprising that they the Elks just put up a bunch of points, looked great. James Wilder, 4th quarter, holy mackerel!
Yeah, how'd you like that run?
That is a run. I remember his father playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 80s, and man, he is he the best running back in the CFL?
I think he's definitely made a case. And yeah, wow. I'm really happy for James Wilder, being someone in Toronto who saw him light it up and then really kind of struggle. Almost seemed like, I think maybe coaches kind of lost interest in making him a priority, but maybe he himself was losing interest because he wasn't priority, but like he just really struggled. And wow, this is the old James Wilder Jr., who I got to say is one of the most interesting running backs I've ever seen, because his body type is not the prototypical running back at all. He's so long in the torso and tall, and he's got these long strides, but he can still, obviously he can carry half a Stampeders defense on his back. But he just doesn't have that low center of gravity. He's neither like a pounded up the middle guy, and he's not really like the quick beat you outside either, but he's got a complete game. I think his speed is underestimated. He's a great pass catcher. He's a great blocker. So he's just kind of the complete deal, while being so archetypical or atypical of what your usual, star running back is. I just think he's fascinating. But one of the other things, though, is that he's stepping into a real leadership position on that team. And I think that's credit to Jamie Elizondo too. It sounds like he might have had that chat with him and said, look, we want you to be a leader on this team. And that means, being focused, being there for the guys, building them up, coaching them up. And you can tell he's taken this as seriously as ever. And that's why he's leading the league in rushing.
Yes, absolutely. And, we have to mention the guy on the other side of the ball too, in Kadeem Carey, because he's played very well this year, and that touchdown run was pretty nice. He made some good moves on that run. That's another team. They get Bo Levi Mitchell back in there. Not that, Jake Maier was playing that badly, but do you think Bo Levi can give them a boost to the rest of the season for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, Bo Levi's Bo Levi, I think for sure there. I mean, Jake Maier's been excellent, but Bo Levi wins. He likes to tell us all, but he does have one of the best win-loss records of any quarterback that's ever played the game. Bo Levi Mitchell wins football games. And so I took heat on Twitter this week because I'm calling Calgary, I'm including them in the same tier with 5 other teams as good as 3rd place in the league, even though Calgary's record is as bad as Ottawa's in a sense. But these are the Calgary Stampeders. Like they're way better than their record shows right now. They've played the games close. They're so well coached. They have such great continuity at the positions. The talent is deep. I'm not looking at Calgary and thinking that they're a pushover by any means. I think that West Division is so tight. It's going to be so exciting down the wire. But Calgary's a great team. Great team, division. Top to bottom.
Now, what I see, Bo Levi Mitchell has been in this Calgary team for a long time, close to 10 years almost. That's not something that you traditionally see in the CFL, is it? You don't see quarterbacks stay, on teams for a long period of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess you are right with that because I mean, we look at all the teams that a number of the others have played for, and you're exactly right. That is incredible longevity for Bo Levi Mitchell there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely still his team. Although if I were Ottawa, I'd be calling to inquire about either of those quarterbacks. But I'd
Really?
be calling Toronto and Hamilton and asking about both of their backups too if I were Ottawa. But yeah, I mean, Bo is the Calgary Stampeders and a huge part of that identity. I think some of the chatter about him maybe getting dealt to Ottawa after Mayor's great game is just kind of Twitter nonsense and
Yeah,
whatever
I don't
else.
think
And
he's.
yet, Calgary has to have a succession plan. Bo's arm and shoulder has not been good for years. And now he's been struggling with his leg injury. And so who
Mhm.
knows what happens. I mean, I don't mean in the next game or whatever, but the Calgary Stampeders are always looking at succession planning, and they're looking beyond this season too. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Bo Levi. But I fully expect him to reclaim what's his and lead that team for the rest of the season. But
Right, absolutely. So
yeah.
we head into week 6 this coming weekend, and I'll go over the schedule here real quick. Friday, September 10th, we have Hamilton at Toronto. Um, Saturday, September 11th, we got a triple header. Saskatchewan at Winnipeg, Calgary at Edmonton, and Ottawa at BC. Now, the funny thing about this coming week, we have 3 games where they're flip flopped from the week before. Is that something that usually happens in the CFL? You
Yeah,
see that a
usually
lot?
after Labor Day, there is a home and home tradition for
Okay.
those three games, and that's why the fans love these rivalries because it is always such a bloodbath when you get a home and home. I mean, the tempers are still, it's all still
Well, you saw the
boiled
tempers in
right on
Hamilton and
edge.
Toronto. At the end of the game, and there was a brawl.
Yeah, before the game too.
Yeah, before the game.
Yeah,
So,
exactly, right. And
so
you haven't seen anything yet because it's just going to be the next level next week. So
So you
it's a
see any of these games going in the other direction, with the home team winning
uh,
this game? Because,
I have no with
yeah,
those two road victories the other day, I don't know what to think. I usually
yeah,
say that home and homes are really hard to sweep. And you'll quite often see even when one team is,
hmm,
better than another in the standings, you'll often see a split because coaches make good adjustments.
yeah.
It's just hard to repeat a win twice in a row. That said, like I don't know. I mean, I never liked Saskatchewan's chances going into Winnipeg, and why would I like them any better having just lost at home? So I think that's going to be really tough. And I think Hamilton, as I said, is a complete team, the real deal. I think the Argos, they so badly need to win this game. This game's sold out. Toronto's trying to increase its fan base. There's no better time than when the crowd is wild and raucous on the back end of the home and home with Hamilton Tiger Cats, with all their fans in town. Argo's got to put points on the board right away, get the crowd into it, make it an
hmm.
amazing experience, not just to get a win for the team, but to get people in this city behind the Toronto Argos. They need to win this game. I don't know if they can.
Well,
It's
well,
it's
you
going to
got to
be tough.
think. You played them the week before. You have an opportunity. It's not like you need to scout. You know, to see. You just played the team a couple days before, so you should be ready, and you should see. Okay, we didn't do this right. We didn't do that right. Let's make these changes, and hopefully, they did have a couple guys out because of COVID. That didn't practice that week. So hopefully they can make some changes and it'll go in the other direction, but I'm not sure. I
that's
don't have
true.
enough experience watching to know, guess how this is going to go with any of those games. And then we have Ottawa at BC here, and you got to think that BC is going to be ready for Ottawa because you never know what you're going to get with them. You don't know if their offense is going to be better like it was last week with the quarterback change or what. So, any thoughts about that?
I don't know. You have to think that they're going to win one at some point, but I'm not sure this is the one. Historically, too, when you look at the records of teams when they have to fly to the West Coast, that's 3-hour time difference. That is often a factor in these games too. Eastern teams don't perform very well in Vancouver. It's a lot of travel time. I think that could be a factor in this one. So I don't know. I'm definitely picking BC in this one. I like Riley for fantasy this week for sure. I like Whitehead going up against those two pretty raw corners in Ottawa. So I don't know. I think it's a tough task for Ottawa. And yet maybe they rally behind a new quarterback. So you never know what happens there. Back to Toronto. I want to see Toronto clean up their undisciplined play. And you mentioned the injuries. That's a big concern. I don't think TSN mentioned. I was really disappointed, but Cresden Butler was out the entire second half of that game at safety. And Josh Haggerty came in. Butler has been a huge part of that Toronto defense. So I think that might have affected the swing that we saw in the second half in Hamilton as well. I don't know the status of his injury, but I'm very curious. Philip Blake also went down in that game, and he had missed most of the week of practice to COVID protocol, but then he also looked banged up in the game too. So there's some injury concerns for Toronto that are concerned, but if they clean up that undisciplined play and plug in someone that can get some yardage on punt returns, get the crowd behind them early with an early touchdown, and maybe they can pull this one out. Riders in Winnipeg, I don't know. I'm going to take all kinds of flack from Rider fans if I doubt them, but oh man, will
the real Cody Fajardo please stand up?
And I guess that's it. If the real Cody, who's sharp and confident, comes in and strings together some early quick passes, and they don't have to be bombs for touchdowns. Just quick hot routes, 5 in a row to Kyron Moore and whoever, just to kind of get him in the game. Maybe that makes a big difference, but who knows there. And then Calgary and Edmonton. Again, I'm not sure. You've got to think that Edmonton crowd's going to be fired up behind their team, and the team's going to be raring to go after their big win in Calgary. So maybe sweeps on these home and homes, going back home, having one on the road is the thing. I think I might pick Edmonton this week, as good as they looked.
It's a good possibility, but I have a feeling that Bo Levi is going to be back this week, and that might pump up Calgary a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see that. Mm-hmm. Interesting to see how they, react with him coming back, and should be a fun game.
That's right.
And then we have Ottawa at BC, which we had said that's the late game, at least here on the East Coast. 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that'll be a late
start. One. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. It's as I said, it's been entertaining this year. I'm looking forward to the games. I've had a lot of fun watching them and getting to know all the players in the CFL and different things. So I've been really enjoying it.
Right on. Well, the scheduling's interesting. As Bill noted, we've got a triple header on Saturday, only 4 games in a week. But you've got 10 hours of CFL football that you can watch on ESPN Plus. And I encourage anyone listening, thanks for listening, to check out those games, and maybe you can get into it. But it's an interesting thing, the scheduling in the CFL, partly because of 9 teams. It's not a consistent schedule. Friday night football is a thing, but there's a shift in the schedule away from Sunday and Sunday afternoon games as the NFL season starts.
Right.
There's a shift from afternoon to evening games. So this week we get the triple header on Saturday. 2 weeks ago, we had 3 games in a row on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, all at 7 o'clock Eastern. So there's a lot of chatter around the league, what fans prefer. With how the games are scheduled, everyone's unanimous that no one wants a game on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night. But other than that, there are lots of opinions. What do you think about that, Bill? Do you have any thoughts?
I like the Friday night game. I like this past week. Well, not this week though. I guess it was the week before where they had a Friday night, Saturday, and a Sunday nighter. That was kind of neat. Every night having a game. I don't know about the the triple header that it's kind of they're all jammed together. I don't know.
It's a long day.
Yeah, yeah, that's for
They
sure.
want to stick with soda for the first game at least.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. So how about we go ahead and we're gonna head to some CFL fantasy talk. And I thought it would be a fun idea to do the CFL fantasy segment where we talk about how we did in the previous week's matchups and make some predictions on the coming weeks. Called Fantasy Studs and Duds. And how did you do this week in fantasy, Dallas?
Oh, I'm glad you're asking me this week. I'll start with the Pickem first. So we've got 2 free-to-play fantasy leagues for CFL fans, if anyone's interested. One is called CFL Pickem, and you just pick the winners, the game winners. You can weigh how confident you are on that decision, which will earn you more or less points. But it's a pretty simple game to play where you're just picking the team you think is going to win. And then CFL Fantasy is more of a roster with a managed salary cap or points that you spend to fill out players who get points for yardage gained and completions and touchdowns and whatever else. But this week was with Pickem, I went 50-50 because of those 2 road wins, Winnipeg going into Regina and the win in Calgary by the Edmonton Elks. So I went 2 of 4 on Pickem. And on the roster, CFL Fantasy, I would say it was a pretty good week for me. I had 90 some points, which fared pretty well. Everybody had over 10, lots of 15, 17 points, but I had Jake Mayer, Kadeem Carey, William Stanback, Josh Huff, Tavares Daniels, Nate Bahar, and the Als. So in that one, not too bad. All of those players had decent nights, but they didn't light it up. And I gotta talk to you a little bit. I've got another game on DraftKings where I did do really well. I'm in a league with Rider fans, 20 players each week, and I finished second for the second week in a row. And that's because my team was quite different. I had Eugene Lewis in Montreal, who had 2 touchdowns and a really great night. Not quite as great as Jake Winneke. I also had William Stanback in that one. Just some solid picks over there. So it's been a good week in that one for me. But hey, how'd you do, Bill? I noticed you were ahead of me last week. So the CFL veteran fan doesn't have anything on the new fan. Tell us how you did.
Well, I'll start with Pickem. In Pickem, I only got one right this week, and that was the Alouettes game. And I went pretty heavy on the weight of my picks, so I'm definitely in the negative for this past week for Pickem. But we get to the CFL fantasy, our rosters were similar at the top because I took Jake Meyer, who had a decent game, 17.1 points, Kadeem Carey, DJ Foster, which if you looked at the game, you were thinking, maybe he didn't do so good. He got 10.2 points. The receptions, 5 receptions helped him out a lot. I had Josh Huff, who's been on a roll, especially with Jake Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been going to decent. He had 15.5 points. The pick that I didn't do so hot on was Steve Dunbar from Hamilton, and he only had 3.3. I had over 90 some points, and then I had Kyron Moore and the Alouettes defense. But I did the DraftKings too, and I've been doing these 50-50s, where instead of the goal is to pick players that nobody else is picking, you try to go with players that are going to score the points. And I've actually done pretty well in the last couple of weeks. And my one team scored like 100 and some points, 112 points. My team, and on there I had Nick Arbuckle, and I would have had more points if I wouldn't, because he didn't do good. But I had Kadeem Carey, Greg Ellison, Jake Winicki, Kyron Moore, Josh Huff, and the Riders defense. So that was a pretty decent team all put together. So
yeah, that sounds like a solid team, and lots of really good go-tos in that team that you picked. I think Kyron Moore is always a pretty solid pick. Cody really likes to look to him. Josh Huff is becoming a regular part of that Stamps offense. It's hard to pick those Stampeders receivers. Quarterbacks spread the ball out quite a lot, and yet Josh Huff has really stepped up. And relative to his cost in fantasy, he's often a good value pick, because he's not up there in the 9,000-10,000 range with DeVaris Daniels, or even higher, like Burnham or Ellingson or whatever.
And
so I like
one of the players that I'm familiar with, because he played for the Philadelphia Eagles here. Maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. He had 2 years in Philadelphia, so I am familiar because I'm not too far from Philly. I'm
right on
2 hours away, so I was familiar with him. The other thing I like to do is give her studs and duds. And before I give, the future studs, I picked out a couple studs and duds from this past week. And I'll see if you agree with me. My first stud would be Trevor Harris, 36.32 fantasy points. And, he had a price point of 9,900. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for a quarterback. And the other one I picked was Daniel Peterman, and you're thinking, what? Why is he a stud? Well, he only cost 5,400, and he got 26.7 fantasy points. So pretty good. And then I threw in a couple duds here. Brandon Banks has been fantasy-wise pretty disappointing, because, at one point he was like 14,000 at the beginning of the season. Now he's down to he was down to 10,900. And he's only getting 10 fantasy points, 10.7 fantasy points. And the other one was BJ Cunningham. He's a 6,600 price point, and he only had 6.7 fantasy points.
Yeah, I think you nailed those. I mean, Brandon Banks has struggled all year. I think a lot of that has to do with Braylon Addison not being in the lineup, attracting other attention of defensive backs. And then Banks is not returning at all. So those are some points in fantasy that he used to get. Now with Frankie Williams on punt return, I think Banks still does field goals, but he's definitely struggled as teams key on him as the or one of the elite receivers in this league. But definitely he's had a tough go. I think you nailed those duds. BJ Cunningham had some drops in the previous week. Yep. I was pleased with my Eugene Lewis pick, because in the last Alouettes game, with Quan Bray and BJ Cunningham dropping the ball a few times each, and seeing Eugene Lewis and the way that his hands are outstanding, and I just thought he's going to be a go-to guy this week, I think, because he's reliable, and Vernon Adams is struggling and trying to find his confidence. So he's going to throw the ball to the two guys who aren't going to let him down, Jake Winicki being the other, who seems to have maybe the best hands in the CFL. And you're right about Peterman. I thought it was going to be Bahar. I was wrong, but Peterman has become the go-to receiver in Ottawa. Totally reliable, just great hands, makes a catch. And great for him to step up. At the same time, I think, you need a better receiving core in Ottawa than just that as well. So they've got things to figure out. But Peterman has been outstanding. And wow, what a pick at 26.7 points at $5,400.
Yep. So do you have any people this week that you're looking at that you think are gonna pull through
Oh
and get you
yeah,
some?
sorry. Let me pull up my squad for this week. Maybe I can't do this quickly, but anyway, I think Andrew Harris at home is probably a solid pick. Now, I often try to step back from picking the really expensive running backs. I think quite often rushing touchdowns will often come from the QBs. As often they'll get down to the one on a pass interference play in the end zone. You see a guy like Cody Fajardo is going to run for way more touchdowns than William Powell is, for example. And some of that, is that. So I often don't like to take those really pricey running backs. And yet this week at home, when I think those home teams are going to come up big, James Wild Jr. and Andrew Harris at that high price tag, those guys might be worth it this week.
Absolutely.
I can see them having huge games.
And you know who I'm going to pick who has been doing pretty decent, but I think they need to give him more of a workload, and that's DJ Foster. He every time he gets his hands on the ball, he does something with it, and I really like him again this week. We'll see if they can get him more involved or what exactly happens. I put in Daniel Peterman because they got to throw it to somebody, and he looked pretty good this past week.
That sounds like a sound strategy. Yep.
And I picked the Toronto Argonauts defense. I mean, they are pretty talented. I know. This is going to come back to haunt me, but yeah, that's who I picked.
I love it. You're a huge fan. You're a true fan, Bill. And it's true. Look at that Argonauts defense. Other bright spots, too. The way that they've been rotating their linebackers. I think some people have been wondering about the play of Cameron Judge because I think they paid a pretty penny to sign him as a free agent. And he's not always on the field. He's going back to a platooning role, which he kind of had in Saskatchewan a little bit, too. Platooning both in the middle on second down passing situations. And he's sharing the spot with Dexter McCoyle, who's no slouch, who's been I think an all-star in this league at linebacker as well. So they're platooning at the will linebacker spot, but also they're either of them can come in and play middle with Enoch Mwamba going out on second down situations. And I noticed that they were playing a 3-4 defense in the game the other day in Hamilton, which was really interesting too. So they were getting 4 linebackers on the field. So they've got depth and a wealth of talent at that position, and they're trying to use it, which I think is really, really interesting. And then the rest of that Toronto D, maybe not the other day, but earlier this season, they've looked really dominant too. So I like that pick. Maybe they can come up with some big turnovers in front of the home crowd at BMO and get a big win against the Ticats.
We hope. We will see. So I guess we need to wrap it up here. Of course, we're the 3-minute warning Canadian Football League podcast. I'm at PigsKentPunk13 on Twitter. Dallas is at CFL Fans Toronto. We're part of the All Sports All Plays Network and live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So until next time, we will see you later.
See you next week. Thanks for watching, everyone.